Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening ladies and gentlemen. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, dan salam kebajikan. It is our great pleasure to welcome Professor Renato Pereira, Professor of General Management at Business School Lisbon, Portugal, Ibu Sari Sita Laksmi PhD ESC, Deputy Director of the MBA FEB UGM Jakarta Kampus, Bapak Rangga Almahendra PhD, lecturer at FEB UGM, who will also serve as our moderator this evening. Lecturer of MBA FEB UGM, student of MBA FEB UGM Jakarta Kampus, student of MBA FEB UGM Yogyakarta. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let us express our gratitude to God for His blessing and grace. So we are gathered this evening for the executive series with the topic Business Beyond Borders Leading Through Geopolitical Change. To beginning tonight event, let us sing Indonesian National Anthem, Indonesia Raya, dan Himne Gajah Mada. Attendants are kindly requested to stand.
Indonesia tanah airku, tanah tumpah darahku. Di sanalah aku berdiri, jadi pandu ibuku. Indonesia kebangsaanku, bangsa dan tanah airku. Marilah kita bersatu, Indonesia bersatu. Hiduplah negeriku, hiduplah negeriku, bangsaku, rakyatku semuanya. Bangunlah jiwanya, bangunlah badannya, untuk Indonesia Raya.
Gajah Mada.
Bagi kami mahasiswa Gajah Mada semua, ku berjanji memenuhi panggilan bangsaku.
Thank you so much. We please to sit back again. The next agenda is the welcoming remarks from the Deputy Director of the MBA FEB UGM Jakarta Kampus, Ibu Sari Sitalaksmi PhD. Ibu Sari, time is yours.
Okay. Good evening and welcome. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Honorable and distinguished guests tonight, Professor Renato Pereira, Professor of General Management at ISCTE, hopefully I pronounce it correctly, Business School, Lisbon, Portugal. Dr. Rangga Almahendra, who will be serving as the moderator of our executive series tonight. My colleague and fellow lecturer, Bu Ina Melati, the one and only lady in the table. And last but not least, our respected MBA students, welcome to our event tonight. On behalf of the MBA program, FEB UGM, and Professor Gugup Kesmono, is unable to attend the event tonight. I would like to extend our thank you to Professor Pereira. Welcome back again to Jakarta, to Indonesia. Today's event is actually the third executive series held in Jakarta, because we have executive series both held in Yogyakarta and Jakarta, but connected. But especially in the event in Jakarta, this is third one. So we are very honored to have you here. And this program is actually part of our leadership enhancement and acceleration program, where we continuously equip students with contemporary issues in business and organizations. Well, the audiences are composed of students from our senior executive classes, where the topic of business beyond borders leading through geopolitical change is highly relevant. Yeah, I believe that for the last few months, Indonesia and I think the world has faced some turmoil and dynamics in the geopolitical, and the students are more than um, knowledgeable, very knowledgeable on what's happening in their business, and perhaps we're going to have a fruitful discussions later, hopefully. And not only the turmoil caused by the U.S.-Iraq war, but also the further impact on that and on businesses in Indonesia. Perhaps we can reflect on what's happening, perhaps in your country, in Portugal, and perhaps in European countries that might be relevant to the lesson learned in Indonesia. As for Professor Renato, this is definitely not your first visit, and hopefully this is not your last visit. We'll be welcoming Professor Renato again in September. We'll be going to have events with our doctoral program with Professor Prem from Melbourne. So we'll already have two agenda this year with Professor Renato in a larger forum next next September. I would like also to announce as of today, we have a new concentrations, so-called strategic leadership, organizational design and culture, where scholarships are available for outstanding talents and leaders. This might not be relevant to all of you already because you already passed this stage, but we just have a launch this morning, and it's now available as one of the concentrations. The program will start this August. So please, if you also have some colleagues, junior colleagues or relatives that might be sneaking or trying to find a new school or pursue further studies, it might be one of the alternatives. For the existing students who wish to pursue further studies, next slides. We also have this what we call it doctorate in business. But first, please finish your master degree first, and then this might be the next stepping stone. Well, this is a doctorate program specially designed for practitioners. So we already have our first batch this February. So the intake is only once a year, which is every February. And Professor Renato will be very delighted that he will be also participating in the lecture in September. Yeah. So this program is in collaboration with Osnabrück University, Germany, funded by DAAD Germany. So there's also a chance for the students to have some experience interactions with the DPA students from Germany, and perhaps also scholarship to go to Germany for short course. And definitely for the Osnabrück lecturers to come over and give some lectures here. And this will, perhaps if you would wish, we might open for public the lectures in September. So if you want to have a sneak peek and speed your master program and then jump to the next boat to the doctoral program, that might be a good idea for this year resolution. Under these collaborations, we wish that collaboration MBA program, our master, our doctoral program, and also our partner universities, we wish to have a much broader, some kind of opportunities for the students to have international exposures. Renato, we have customary some traditions that we close or start a speech with a poem. Although I can get assisted by the ChatGPT, but I think it's okay. So please, audiences to have cakap ya after this, yeah, because Professor Renato is from Lisbon, so I'll pick that particular hometown of yours to be part of the poem. It's in bahasa, it's hard to get the poem in Portugal. Dari Lisboa menuju Jakarta. Cakep. Membawa semangat lintas budaya. Geopolitik dunia terus berubah nyata. Kemitraan kuat jadi kunci percaya. So it's championing because of collaboration. Once again, thank you very much for Professor Renato, and I hope this event will be fruitful and also have a fruitful discussions. Thank you very much, and have a good seminar or executive series. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bu Sari. We kindly invite Ibu Sari again to the stage because we have to give a souvenir to Professor Renato, and we invite Professor Renato and Ibu Sari to come to the stage. Before we going to the main session, we have a photo session. So maybe we call all the audience to stand up and to go to the front because we have a photo session. Okay, students, we going to have a photo session with Prof. Renato. Yeah. Facing at the stage. Facing at the stage. Maybe you have to go to the front, so you don't have to go far away from the Prof. Renato. Mari Bapak Ibu, agak merapat aja. Agak maju aja Bapak Ibu semuanya. Okay. Okay, you guys all ready? Okay, we started the first photo pose. We have a formal pose with a warm smile. I count 1, 2, and 3. Okay, we have a move at the second pose, the UGM style pose with the biggest smile. Okay. Okay. I will count like 1, 2, and 3. Okay. And the last pose, we have a casual pose with your best smile. Okay. Okay, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, awesome, and thank you so much, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now at the main event of tonight's exclusive series, which will be moderated by Bapak Rangga Almahendra, PhD. To Bapak Rangga, time it's yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam, shalom, may peace be upon you. Good evening. Today it is such a great honor for me to welcome our distinguished guest, Professor Renato Pereira, and also thank you for your pantun, Ibu Sari. I don't have any pantun, but I only have one pantun. Yeah, ikan hiu makan tomat. MBA student, I love you so much. Also, respected colleagues, friends, and of course, the very reasons why we are here today, the future leaders, our beloved MBA students. Welcome to our MBA Executive Series today, and we will discuss a very important and interesting topic about business beyond borders leading through geopolitical changes. And it is such an honor for me to stand in front of all of you distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Rangga Almahendra, your strategic management lecturer. All right. We always discuss, We always discuss in class about the importance of analyzing our competitors and also analyzing our customer. But imagine, what if the most important pressure, what if the most pressing threat in a business world today is not coming from your competitors, it's not coming from your customer pressure, but rather come from a tweet by an old man living in a Mar-a-Lago, or probably by a drone missile landed in Middle East. Although we know that this missile doesn't really land it in Jakarta, but we can feel the pain. We have to pay the cost. So imagine, what if the next business disruption is no longer from Silicon Valley, but probably from Hormuz Strait, or probably from Malacca Strait. Who knows? So, welcome to the year of 2026. During the first quarter of this year, we witnessed with our own eyes. We learned very painful lesson about business does not operate in vacuum, but indeed, business operates under circumstances of conflict, tension, and the fragility of global trust. So this is the reality of our business world today. So I think the most important question that we want to discuss today is no longer how actually we can grow or expand our business cross border, but the most important question is actually how we can make our companies become a global companies while at the same time our world is being divided. How can we lead in this middle of uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity? I know that's not easy. So that's why we are lucky. We have a very respected scholar, an international expert, coming from ISCTE, correct? ISCTE, Business School from Lisbon. So please, ladies and gentlemen, please join me. Give your best tenderest applause to Professor Renato Pereira. Hello, Professor.
Thank you.
Boa noite. Boa noite. Sorry. Yes, Professor.
Okay.
So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me tonight.
Yes, it is a very timely, your presence. So if you don't mind, I will explain a bit about our arrangement for today.
Sure.
So you will give a lecture, probably like 1 hour. Yeah.
Okay.
And then we will continue with the Q&A session, if you don't mind.
Sure.
All right?
Of course.
Okay, you already have your slide, right?
Yes, I do.
Thank you very much. And now the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you all and welcome to this session. It is an honor for me to be here tonight discussing these topics that I have been studying and also discussing with other batches like yours in other countries. And we are living a very particular moment where everything seems to be so uncertain, right? But, you know, life is about uncertainty, so there is no real reason why we should not discuss what is less comfortable for us and should try to have a critical view and understand what's going on and try to take the best possible action. Okay, so I have a provocative question. What is going in the world that could disrupt businesses these days? And the answer is so many things that is nearly impossible to have a list, a complete list of all. So what I did is I tried to come up with a list of 5 trends that I think are creating the most turmoil, we could say, for business leaders. So the list of 5 is the one that I put here. First is what has been going on for already some time now, which is the possible replacement of US by China as the leading economic power in the world. But of course, not just the leading economic power, because US is also the leading military power. And with the combination of the two, the US took advantage to create other sources of leadership. So it is very difficult, or has been very difficult for China to replace all those sources. And I think it's worthwhile discussing a little bit on those sources to see how much the world could change also from that perspective. The second thing is one of the points where the US actually based its advantage was on the control of the currency that governs the international trade, the US dollar, and how they created after 1948 with the Bretton Woods Agreement a way of controlling the financial international system, and how they have been using it effectively to have to control who has access to money around the world and eventually who can get a faster way of development. This policy has reached a stage where some economists call it a fake money. So just to call the attention that most of the money that is printed out these days doesn't really have a source of value, right, in the base. So could trigger a very problematic situation whereby markets could stop, accepting US dollar and thus creating a big disruption, because most of the central banks in the world are loaded with US dollars in their reserves. So this transition is also part of the overall transition of US, if potential transition of US to a less powerful position in the world economy and the world politics. The third one is climate change. Climate change is undeniable these days, despite the fact that some people and some presidents try to deny it. It's very obvious. We have some countries that have lost half of their useful land for agriculture is lost. So it's creating very impressive consequences. So we need to take it into consideration to see actually how much this will influence also the geopolitics these days. The fourth one is how much globalization as a leading trend since the 1960s, and we can go even backwards to the immediate period after the Second World War to see how much globalization was the leading trend to build this new world. And we are now experiencing a decrease in the strengths of globalization, also called slowbalization, like a slow way of getting the world global. So that's the fourth trend. And finally, the one that is more connected with the war that we are seeing these days, the Iran, US-Iran, or we could say Israel-Iran war, right? With using United States as a proxy for the first time. And how this is also so new that we could say it's part of what is called the never normal. So we moved from a situation where unusual events were rare. Then we had COVID-19 that totally disrupted the world and changed the way we work today, to a situation where the succession of new events is such that nobody could expect to return back to some normality or the kind of normality we had before all these events. So these are some of these are the 5 trends that I would like to discuss the next hour. And then of course we have time during the Q&A to go more deep into some of them according to your preferences, of course. So first thing is we have to understand the role or the importance of this change with China, because China is not a democracy. So most of the way the global capitalism evolved was around the idea that everybody would become, in some extent, a democracy. So China is the first country that has managed to reach a significant economic power without needing freedom to get there. So either China will be forced to become a democracy as well, because freedom proves to be necessary to reach the last step of the economic upgrade process, or China doesn't need that, and this will inspire lots of countries to give up democracy and become totalitarian regimes. So that is a very critical thing to consider when it comes to geopolitics. So that's why, in some extent, we have this alliance between China and North Korea and Russia, and then you have also US supporting Russia in some extent. So all these countries have in common the fact that they are not democracies, except US, but in the process of losing part of that process. So it means that China uses the non-democratic system to prevent salaries to grow, because there are no unions, so there is no negotiation, and they can take hold of the increase in productivity to support new investment cycles. So there is no real need for sharing the productivity, the additional poverty with employees. This has never happened before in the economic history, never. So this is something totally new, and this has been working well for 20 years. Another thing that is somehow new is the fact that China does not respect copyrights, feels entitled to imitate anything they want, and they use this as a leverage to knowledge transfer. It's unpaid knowledge transfer. So this is something that is totally new. So how impressive was this? So this is China in 1979. 1979 is the year, the first year after China decided to embrace the one country, two systems policy, right? When they moved from pure communism to a mixed system, where you have some special economic zones around some towns like Shanghai, for example. And in those towns, in those cities, the economy would work as any other country, any other free country in the world. And the rest of the, especially the rural areas in the country, would remain under pure socialist system. So you can see in this chart that the US led with an 11% market share, right, in the international trade. Okay, and China was at the bottom with less than 1% market share. Okay, this is 1979. The year also where China resumed the diplomatic relationships with the US by announcing to the US that they didn't believe that communism could lead to superior economic output. So they were dropping. So the United States got to be very excited about this. And the idea was for China to be accepted again in international institutions. So it was little by little, right? First in the United Nations, and then later, which was the first actually target, to be admitted at the World Trade Organization, which happened in 2001. So now you will see how much China progressed between 1979 and 2001. Okay? This is how much it progressed, even being outside the World Trade Organization, right? So, but still a market share below 5%. Okay? So US still led, Germany still second, Japan still third, and France in this case was fourth, but China was already fifth. Okay? This is 2001. And now we'll see what happened to China after joining the World Trade Organization in late 2001. This is what happened. So China now is the leading country in the international trade, right? With a market share of almost 15%. And you see that the United States that were at about 11, right? They were at about, at 12. About 11, is that exactly about 11, they moved back to 8, right? To 8%. So this would explain why Trump is trying now to enforce these tariffs, right? To protect local industries and prevent products, especially from countries like China, to replace the local demand, right, for local production. Okay, so that is why China is a big concern. In the next chart, you will see this is the latest data. This is not in percentage, but if you do the calculations, you see that the three first competitors remain more or less at the same market share. So China, US, and Germany are more or less at the same position. So who is China, or who is actually, why is China not growing anymore after 2020, we could say? What happened in the last 5-6 years? Because China, if you do the calculation, they are still at the same market share. So what happened since? The world reacted to what was happening in China. What triggered the reaction in the world? COVID-19. What happened after COVID-19? China decided not to release the medical supplies that were manufactured in China to the customers across the world. So in Europe particularly, there were no masks when COVID-19 hit. So many countries were forced to lockdowns because there were no medical supplies to support the spread of the disease. So in many places, especially in Europe, there was a strategic decision of rebuilding some of the supply chains and cut the contracts with China. So China now understood that the competition could not be done anymore on the traditional, large-scale production with cheap prices. That kind of competition is over. So some countries are taking advantage of that. Vietnam is taking advantage of that. Thailand is taking advantage of that. Maybe Indonesia should take more advantage of that. So most countries are looking for alternatives to China. Nobody wants to be under the dependence of China as they were before. This will take time, of course, but there are lots of opportunities rising from this event. Second thing that happened with COVID-19 was that the fact that China could not compete anymore on large-scale production, it prompted China to invest on more sophisticated technologies. So you know that we had these COVID-19 vaccines very fast because AI was used to develop those vaccines, right? It wasn't the doctors and the scientists that created these vaccines. I mean, they led the process, but they use AI for the first time in very large extension. So instead of taking 10 years to have a vaccine, it took us like 10 months, right? And very soon, everybody got access to a vaccine across the world. How were those vaccines developed with AI? What is the efficiency rate of the Chinese vaccines in those days? About 50%. What was the efficiency rate of the US vaccines in those days? About 95%. So the gap in AI was major between the two countries. So China decided to invest a lot in AI in these past 5 years. And it's becoming to be a player focused on new technologies. So here you have the difference between China and US in terms of economic output. So China leads international trade, but it's still 6 times below US in terms of per capita GDP. So it means that the productivity in China is still very low. So China is doing two things. One is decreasing population, although it's not a consequence of a policy, but it's decreasing population for the first time. So it's replacing unproductive people by productive people. Because, you know, in the process of decreasing population in developed countries, people, when they have less children, they invest more in their children. So they give more education, right? And people become more productive. They get better jobs and they get better salaries. So now this is happening in China for the first time. But there's still a huge gap in terms of GDP, right? And then this links with the next stage. So how do you fund significant investments like investments in high-level technology? With debt, right? With money. And if you don't have the money from, from your own current output, you have to take it from loan. So US has been doing this at least since 1993, as we can see here. It took 80 years to print the first $1 trillion, which is more or less related with the output generated by US. And then ever since, you see that the second trillion took only 19 years, and now is a question of months, right? Months before they issue another $1 trillion. So dollar became like, like the air, you just blow and there is more air. So it's unbelievable how much. So this is how much the debt in the US increased, right? You see this exponential effect, okay? Reaching now close to $38 trillion in accumulated debt in 2025. Okay, so US has been funded its competitiveness based on debt. Other countries did the same. Japan did the same. Is still doing the same. China never did that. China grew organically for 20 years. So now what's happening with China is that this is the opposite effect, right? The more debt you have, the less value has the US dollar. Now is at 1 to 0.03, which is dramatic, we could say, almost no value. Eventually it will reach zero in sometime soon. And this is how much the debt has increased across the world since the US started increasing its own debt. So you see there in the second circle that China is already over 90%, is reaching almost 100% in debt. It's a 96. China worked at 10% debt for many years, right? So why is China using that so much debt? To fill the technological gap against the US. So everybody's getting more debt. Of course, not every country here is using debt to fund technology. Sudan is not doing that for sure. But you see Singapore at 176%. You see Japan at 230%, right? And you see that most developed countries are over 100% already, right? And over 100% already. So how much this will have an impact on the value of dollar and how much this could actually end up in a big crisis. Until recently, I would say very high the probability of having a huge financial crisis across the world based on this. Now what I think about this? I think that they are pushing the debt to the maximum possible level, and then they will call for a meeting, and they will delete all the debt across the world, and they will say we have to start fresh because it's impossible to manage these levels of debt. Okay, so China is doing this, pushing the debt as much as possible, close to the level of the US, and when it's become unbearable for the markets to deal with this debt, they will call for a general offset. Okay, let's clear up. It's not possible to manage anymore. You see, this was never used before in history, never. But it's not possible anymore to manage these amounts of debt. It isn't possible, especially from the US perspective. Okay, and you see, France is there, UK is there, right? Singapore is there, right? Belgium is there, some Canada is there as well. Everybody's pushing up the debt as much as they can. So this will have, and this will create a new balance, right? A new balance in the financial markets quite soon. So questions related to this. Are we facing a replacement of the US dollar? In this case, would the renminbi, right, the Chinese currency, will be a good replacement? When the political bloc that came with the idea of replacing the current financial system was the BRICS, and the BRICS are expanding now. And it was announced at some point in time that the BRICS would come up with a new bank, right? And that new bank would replace the IMF. So it will be funding, right, the development in many countries across the world, because IMF was never really for development, right? It was more to be sure that governments will repay debts extensively. So are the BRICS creating this alternative? The answer is no, they are not. Because the only country that could do this is China, and China is not willing to do that, right? The other BRICS don't have enough money for creating an IMF. So China is not taking any steps to replacement. Why is that? Because China has invested for 20 years in American assets, is loaded with the US dollar-based assets. China is the last country in the world interested in that dollar goes away, you see? So there is no real alternative now at this current IMF, World Bank system that depend on US decisions in large extent, okay? So all the development programs are still designed by the World Bank with the same purposes, not developing anybody, right? That's the purpose of these programs. So you go to Africa and they are suggesting some African countries to invest in high-speed trains when people are starving and there is no agriculture. So they want to give money for. Why? Because with that money they will buy technology from other countries, right? They will send back the money to the developed countries. So it's a system of recycling money, right? Not generating any development. So the question is, nobody's coming up with an alternative. China did not come up with this alternative. So some countries are actually less interested these days in supporting China because China has not yet displayed any strategy to counterbalance what the US is doing. No strategy so far. Created the Road and Belt Initiative, which creates lots of dependency, right? Because it's a loan-based process. So you'll be repaying debts forever. And there is no real strategic development endeavor behind these strategies. So this makes it even more difficult to understand who would come next with a fresh approach, right? That would change the balance. Nobody seems to take that role. Nobody. So in terms of money, there were some alternatives that came from what we could call the social society, right? So from people outside these political arrangements. This was the crypto assets and particularly Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin was created by someone that used didn't want to be identified, used a pseudonym, right? And created a Japanese pseudonym, actually, and created the rules that would govern this new currency, right? So the problem is that, again, the idea was to replace a control-based system, controlled by central banks, right, with a system that would be controlled by people in a peer-to-peer network. So depending on a balance between the participants. But that didn't happen either, because if you want to make If you want to get additional Bitcoins without paying for them, you have to mine, right? Is the term they created. And mining Bitcoins required very sophisticated hardware, very expensive. Most people don't have access to that. So who is mining more money? Those who already have money, not those who don't. So this is not also resolving any of the imbalances we have seen so far. So it's a replication of the past world, right, under a new control. And nobody knows exactly, but I assume secret services know who are making more money, right, with this kind of technology. The good thing is that the technology used to develop Bitcoin and other crypto assets, which is blockchain, is a good technology for business. You can actually decentralize the technology of your company by using blockchain. And with that, you are less exposed to be hijacked by some pirate. And this is very good news. Actually, this is the only way, for example, to fight those who control the data these days, like Google and others, that take our data without asking any permission, and we don't have a way of going across it. So blockchain, from that perspective, is a very good technology. Okay? From that perspective, it's a very good technology. Of course, it's not enough. You have probably heard of Web 3.0, right? And that is real decentralization. And that is a huge step forward. But the combination of these technologies actually make businesses more resilient to this, we could say, technological crisis, whereby these large giants are taking all the information from us and are using in ways that we cannot even imagine because we don't have the technology to understand. Every once in a while, there is a glimpse because I have had a colleague recently and he told me, I was having a meeting with some friends and we were discussing going on vacation to Tunisia. And suddenly I start receiving advertisement online about going to Tunisia. And he said, oh, what a coincidence. And then they went to investigate, and then Google has a voice recognition software in your iPhone or especially on the Android systems. So they follow your conversations. If you are having a secret conversation, you have to turn off your phone completely. And then with these technologies, they control everything you do, right? And so the question, is this illegal? Apparently not, because we have checked this in some checklist when you installing the software, but we don't know how these things are used, right? If it's just to advertising vacation or to know or to use this against us if we have any personal issue in the future, right? So technology is a big threat these days. It's a big opportunity, but also is a big threat. And governments are using this to create issues, right? And to control how companies, for example, are managed these days. So that's another area we should be controlling. This is how much Bitcoin has changed in value, right? So now when unit is over $70,000, no other asset has reached this kind of value in such a short period of time. So it's something to be considered. But most people don't use Bitcoin. Does anyone here has invested in Bitcoin already? Anyone? Right. I got the same answer everywhere I go. Nobody trusts Bitcoin for some reason, right? It seems to be, part of this big plot that is used against us in the current times, and we don't know exactly how this could end up. So the reaction from the U.S. authorities has been to try to regulate the crypto assets. So a company these days can use, in the part of the cash management facilities, can use Bitcoin and other crypto assets. So from 2021, there was an agency created, the Office of the Controller of the Currency, and gave the first bank license to a fintech company called Anchorage. And Anchorage is actually providing liquidity for those who use Bitcoin in their transactions. So the same year, a little later, one country decided to adopt Bitcoin as official currency. The country is El Salvador in Latin America. It's a small country. So one could say it's not very significant, but what is significant is that people are looking for alternatives, and Bitcoin should be or could be one of them. You know why El Salvador adopted Bitcoin as official currency? Because they didn't have a currency anymore. They were using US dollar directly. You know, many countries, especially in Latin America, during the 80s and 90s, lost their currencies for inflation. They had 3,000% inflation rates. So they lost their currencies. They decided not to have a currency anymore. So they had to replace by the currency of the international trading system. Otherwise, you cannot import goods anymore. So they had to replace by US dollar. You know what's the problem? What's the problem of adopting a US dollar as a currency? If you want to have liquidity in your banking system, you need to have a correspondent bank in the US. And that corresponding bank will charge you huge fees to grant you liquidity. So they were paying, apparently, over $600 million a year to use US dollar as a national currency. So they replace it with the Bitcoin, okay? And that's another, we could say, reaction, right? Another, we could say, political reaction to a system that was created to diminish the weak in some extent. So there are many other digital assets that investors can use these days as part of this, we could say, new freedom of expression in the economic world in some extent. There is a technology called NFT technology. And this NFT allows you to create assets that are more secure and more easier to store than the assets that were used before. For example, when using a portfolio strategy approach, right, an investor could have some shares, right, and some bonds, but then it will move for real estate, for example, and some move also for paintings, right, masterpieces, like buying some Picasso portrait for a painting for $10 million or so. The problem is when you buy a Picasso, you have to have a place to store it, to secure it, and to maintain it in the proper conditions. With the NFT, you don't need that. It's much easier. So the first tweet ever tweeted was sold by almost $3 million as part of, we could say, investment strategy from one businessman in Malaysia, in that case. And later he will sell it, or he's willing, or he will be prepared to sell, of course, at a higher price. So this is also a new area that, businesses should be very much aware of and understand how to use these technologies for new strategies, right, of investment and also of, asset custody, right? The new generation of digital natives are supposed to be a lot more interested in digital assets than the traditional assets that are controlled by governments, controlled by central banks, and by other, organized institutions from the traditional economic setting, like financial markets in some extent. And so there is a willingness to get more control, right? Personal control and less dependency on central institutions. Right, so that's another area to be taken into consideration. Another one is this digital immersive environments. Have you ever been to the metaverse? Metaverse created by Meta, right, which is the owner of Facebook, right? So Facebook doesn't sell much anymore, right, because it was replaced by other more interesting social media like Instagram and so on. But the metaverse is a different thing. Is a complete alternative world where you can invest, you can have a parallel life, you can design things, you can test products, for example, right? So marketing should consider using metaverse, right? And with related technologies, you can have a complementary life to your real existential life, right? Which is the metaverse. So I advise you to go there, create your profile, create your own avatar, and start checking how things are going on these days, right? in this kind of environments. People are now investing a lot. For example, in property, I see people replacing investment in real estate in the real world to invest in properties in the metaverse, properties that do not exist, but they exist in this world, right? So in that digital landscape. And they are making money with that, and they are doing transactions, and they are creating an alternative way of giving investors ways of making money. So combined with these technologies, you have the deep fakes. Deep fakes are people that do not exist, right? Called personas. So this persona here, Lil Michaela, she has over 3 million followers on Instagram, but she does not exist. And there are lots of people like this. In this case, it's a disclosed deep fake. So you know that this person does not exist. But still there are people following and trying to, understand what she feels about the world and what her reaction to different things. What's the good thing about this? You can use these people to profile customers, for example. So I can create infinite number of personas that could work as my customer research group. Okay, and I can question them on the different features of my product and get feedback generated by AI, of course, but according to the parameters that I use to define the person. So I can actually do consumer research without doing a real market test that would be much more expensive, okay? And I can actually eliminate the most common bias by using these deepfakes, okay? So this is something that is being used by many companies these days, right? Using deepfakes to work as, proxies for real customers and providing feedback on the experience of using a particular product. Of course, if the product has too much of a physical dimension, like clothing, for example, it's a little more difficult.
Recording in
But if
progress.
it's about, how the customer perceive the impact of a certain number of attributes in his value chain, this is being very effective these days. So deepfakes, and of course you have now sites like this one, thispersondoesnotexist.com, where you have thousands of people that do not exist, and that you can relate with attributes and keep, displaying this kind of consumer behavior. They look very real, very real. This is generated by AI. So now you can do all kinds of things. And as long as you have the technology, right, you can extend a lot more the influence of your company by using this army, right, of AI-based army. So that's another very good example. So now we move to climate change. So climate change has already created significant disruption in Europe, right? So with some regions, particularly in Africa, being desertified as a consequence of climate change, many people try to reach Europe by sea, and they were, of course, some will never make it, and those who make it are actually put in areas, containing areas, and then they should make, governments should make a decision about what to do with those individuals. And this in Europe created a problem that although the countries support human rights and they should never put people under those conditions, some are there for over 20 years now, and there are no expectations of exiting those camps. So they have been accused of, some of these parties have been accused of creating concentration camps, like in the Nazi days, because they don't provide a solution for these people. So large-scale population displacements are taking place and will take place more and more in the future because of climate change. So if there is no real reversion, and that reversion is, we don't see how it could happen in the short term, right? Because even if we replace significantly, for example, the means of transportation by other means that are less CO2 related, we'll still have a long way before we could make the climate sustainable again. So that is one another area of big concern. You see that with the melting of the poles, right, as a consequence also of climate change, U.S. and Russia are already, engage into a fight to hold control on the resources. So that's why Donald Trump, for example, threatened to invade Greenland, where a significant amount of resources is supposed to be under the ice, right? And as the ice is melting, they know that the resources will be available, so they are trying to keep control on those resources. So there are different reasons why climate change will also change the geopolitical balance in the world, right? One is this. Of course, there will be more disease outbreaks like COVID-19. COVID-19 is not directly related with the climate change, but there are many potential viruses that will be more active as the planet gets to be warmer and warmer. So again, this will create a big division between those who have technology to fight back this new virus and those who don't, and will be totally dependent on external technology to fight these new threats. So another area of concern, right, that will have potential impact on the geopolitical challenges that we are facing now. The other trend is this globalization, right? So why is globalization getting to be less important as a reference for those countries that want to increase their development levels? So for many years, people believe that the free market will provide the solutions, right? So as more consumers have access to the free market, so this will increase the scale of companies, and companies will have more money to invest. And by investing more and having more revenues, they can actually employ more people as well. So what if some countries that are very successful begin to say that the globalization is not good? And that happened, we could say, first with the UK that decided to exit the European Union. Why did the UK decide to exit the European Union? Because they wanted to create more protectionist measures. And in the single European market, those measures were not up to them to decide. So they have to go through Brussels, right? Through the Brussels to the European Commission. So they decided to exit the European Union because they were feeling that they were losers of globalization. These tariffs, the Donald Trump tariffs, are also a recognition that they are not making as much from globalization as they expected. So suddenly globalization is a threat to everybody, right? It's a threat to everybody. So why is that? Again, this is mainly because of China. So who is the real winner of globalization these days? China is, right? So the other developed countries that were initially very interested in globalization because it was a way of exporting their products across the world are now understanding there is so much competition that they are not competitive anymore. So across the world, what you see more and more is countries raising protectionist measures. Everybody's raising protectionist measures. So we are getting back to an economic context that we don't know for like 80 years or so. This will be totally new because it will be more and more difficult to access markets. There will be different restrictions. These tariffs that Donald Trump is implementing, other countries will implement. Other countries will implement as a desperate measure. So I think for the US, this will not be positive because protectionism usually reduces competitiveness as companies get to be less effective because they are less exposed to competition. So they start developing the resources to be more competitive. But in the short term, this creates significant political leverage. And this will fuel more totalitarian approaches to policy making, right? And you see more in many countries. Hungary just changed the president that was very much like this, but nobody knows because this president, the new president, used to be in the team of the former president. So it could be someone that is exactly the same approach. Nobody knows. But Poland is also threatening to exit the European Union. Slovakia is also threatening to exit the European Union. So more and more countries are actually replacing these multilateralism projects to, we could say, more domestic-centered and we could say less freedom-based economic programs. Latin America has several examples. Brazil just came out of a difficult process with the president in the same style of Trump. But any Latin American country that has decided to go against the US endured severe consequences. So globalization is definitely slowing down. It doesn't mean that it will disappear. It won't, but it will not be the same thing again. So when you look at the landscape, right, I think that domestic strategies will have more importance on the general corporate strategies than they have been having in these past few years. More and more countries will have to consider the getting back to the domestic markets to get the type of empowerment they need to develop. So it's more domestic and regional strategies than rather global strategies. I think pure global strategies will be an exception in years to come. So COVID-19, you know what it was. I just want to highlight that COVID-19 enabled the working from home, studying from home, right, and rendering services from home that was not yet in place. And nobody really understood if there was enough technology to do that. So with COVID, it became very clear that we now have all the technology needed to really work remotely. So instead of approaching markets from a physical presence, the way to go across it is to approach them on a digital platform, right? And those will be more difficult to control, right? So every company that has some kind of digital content could actually have significant leverage by becoming full digital companies and operating and connecting to the global supply chains only on a digital way. So India has done this first, because software engineers from India stopped being granted with work permits in the US. And this was during Donald Trump's first term, right? During his first term, so 12 years ago or so, all the visas to Indians went on a queue system, and now the queue for having a work permit for an Indian citizen is 60 years, right? So it's not possible to think about going to US work. So software engineers have created companies, and they are supplying American companies on the digital landscape, right? And not only they have been doing this very effectively for many years, that now other countries, or meaning other software engineers in other countries, are doing the same. So for example, Kenya is doing this, and there are lots of Kenyan companies that are developing the same approach, and they are selling software. Who would say selling software from Kenya 20 years ago? Nobody, right? And now you have lots of these companies operating in the digital supply chains without any kind of barriers. So that's another thing that came from COVID-19. So that's the thing, we use technology. So now the never normal. What triggered all these wars, right? So ever since COVID-19, we have Ukraine, you have Palestine, the Gaza, right, issue, and now Iran. Why so many conflicts now are taking place, right? And it is like and then as you see, these conflicts, they don't have an end. They are impossible to be won, right? And before, wars were supposed to be won, right? Or were supposed to reach some kind of closure. Now they don't, so they remain open like forever. And nobody's talking about Ukraine these days because there is Iran, and then the next war will offset Iran, And it's very possible that there will be another war soon in some other place. But the thing is, the way the nations used the previous arrangements, right, to channel out their benefits is disappearing. Okay, not only because most countries are not engaging anymore into the previous arrangements, right? The BRICS are not effective, and every possible new alliance is not working anymore, as the way through which countries acquired advantages by promoting this type of conflicts is not effective anymore either, right? So eventually, the fact that out of desperation, people believe that by engaging into a new conflict will be the ultimate answer for some kind of issue, actually turns out to be a never-ending process that pushes the country to go to another conflict to try to offset the previous one, and another, and another. So these three, at least these two last conflicts from Palestine and Gaza and Iran have one thing in common, and that thing is, of course, Israel, right? And the way Israel is perceiving how this globalization process is diminishing the power of US and is making room for Israel to be less powerful in years to come. So Israel is trying to use Donald Trump as an ally to try to offset, to eliminate the enemies around and be in a strong position the moment US will be in a weak position, weak enough to prevent these enemies to chase Israel and eventually to destroy the existential project of Israel. So the problem with Iran is that apparently they did not anticipate how much Iran was prepared to fight back, right? So not only Iran was capable of containing the threats from the US, as they use it as a leverage to take control on the Hormuz Strait. This had never happened before, right? Nobody has ever taken control since the 16th century or so, but nobody after that tried to hold control on that area. So Iran now is trying to make money, right, with the tolls, right, to ships in this area, and eventually they won't pursue that because China is not interested. But actually, the strategic influence of Iran has increased with this war instead of decreasing. So it's an amazing outcome, right, that nobody could predict in the beginning, as the US announced that they will remove and replace the regime and will take all the uranium from Iran that they could possibly use to develop a nuclear weapon against Israel. And then finally, they would take control on the Iranian oil as they did with Venezuela recently. So nothing like that is close to happen. And eventually, the way to finish this war is that actually U.S. will be in a much weaker position when compared to the beginning of the war in that particular region. Having local allies like UAE and Saudi Arabia less confident about being protected by a military power like US in these days in the region. So this is totally unexpected. Nobody could expect something like this, right? I think not even in the US was expecting this to happen. So that's why I call it the never normal. You cannot expect anymore to have anything that you can anticipate as the most likely scenario. The opposite would be more and more true. So the way, for example, we strategize these days in businesses, right? Taking assumptions that were created in the old days, we have to change it quickly, right? Very quick, because every possible, past assumption is not in place. Is not in place anymore. So this is an extra challenge for businesses, right? So business leaders will have to deal more and more with the uncertainty and the difficulty of even creating scenarios that are likely to take place, right? So 20 years ago, people would say, no, so it's easy. What will happen like in the next 50 years? So China will replace US. I'm not that sure anymore. As well as I'm not sure anymore that the US will keep control on everything they control today. But I'm not sure China will be the next replacement, or there will be any replacement, single replacement. So we have to be a lot more careful about these predictable scenarios, and we have to be a lot more thorough in preparing our assumptions, especially for business development. So yeah, this was just to show you how a pandemic crisis could have such a disruptive effect in the world economy. So the first crisis I have here is the big financial crisis, right, of 2008. This was the biggest financial crisis ever in the world, ever. And the biggest financial crisis had as impact a recession of only 0.1% in the global economy, 0.1%. So COVID alone created 3.3% recession. No other event ever has created this kind of thing. So why did COVID create this effect? Because nobody was prepared. So there was an economic shutdown, right? Economic shutdown across the world. And the countries that tried to not shut down faced so much reaction, social reaction, that eventually they had an economic downturn. So lessons to be learned: next time there is a pandemic crisis, we have to react differently. We cannot shut down the economy again. This is crazy, right? This is crazy. And just the time it took to relaunch the economy, it's unbelievable. This cannot happen again, right? But every possible brilliant mind in this planet in those days believed that this was the best course of action, right? This almost killed the world economy. This is just to show how much the Dow Jones that started in 1910 never had such a negative peak as with COVID. Never before. So just to show you how this could happen. And then to finalize my presentation today, I go back to the technology to see how is the power of the algorithm these days, right? How much the algorithm is the new weapon that should be considered, right, as we prepare also business strategies. So this is the market value of the biggest high-tech firms, the top 10 high-tech firms in the world, and some that are not pure high-tech like Tesla, but are in the tech field, right, investing in energy systems. So the most valued, with the highest market cap these days is NVIDIA's. NVIDIA's is about $4.5 trillion in market cap, which is higher than the GDP of countries like UK, France, Australia, Brazil, Canada, Korea, Russia, India, and almost as high as Germany's, which is the highest GDP in the European Union. One company alone. Of course, comparing a market cap with a yearly GDP could seem, unfair, but this is just to give you an idea of how big these companies are getting to be and how much we have to take them into consideration in years to come, as they are getting, again, the data that could control our businesses. Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon, right? Microsoft and Apple and Google over $3 trillion. Amazon at 227, Facebook almost at 2, and then even Tesla at 146. And I say even Tesla because Tesla, ever since its inception in 2003, was only profitable once, and never again, once, and has this market cap. So investors know the potential of the technology, right? And they are betting on the future. So the top 10 high-tech firms have a combined market value superior to the GDP of China and Japan combined. The top 10 firms. So this is definitely a wake-up call. How did Google take control on the data in the world? Google invented the most brilliant business model ever, called the freemium business model that you probably heard of already, which is provide premium value for free to the users and find someone to pay for that premium value which is the advertisers. So advertisers are paying the value we get. We can run a company up to 50 people using only free applications from Google. It's amazing. But the downturn is that Google is collecting information from all the small businesses in the world these days, right? And using it in a way that we cannot predict, or preparing to use it in a way that we cannot really predict. So AI, data, and analytics are definitely one of the key trends for governing also the geopolitics in the world. So one of the reasons why China has not yet replaced US in the tech landscape relates with the companies and the level of technology that these companies still have, and they are American companies. So how long does it take to any other competitor to reach this kind of stage, right? How long? So that's another question that we can leave open for discussion, but that is definitely a big concern. So the other question will be, will ever China be capable of having companies like this without a real free market? That companies can compete totally freely and using all the resources they need and use financial markets massively like these companies have used? Is it really possible? And if it's not, what will the Chinese government do to fill the gap? How much is the government prepared, right, to really go after the dream of leading the world and at the same time keeping a very controlled system, right? This is another area for geopolitical concern, because there will be a point where the regime will be challenged. Will be challenged because there is no way, until now, no country has reached, very high levels of economic development without very high levels of economic freedom, right? That do not perfectly exist in China. It exists in some extent, but not in full extent. Okay. So I think this will be more or less what I have here is just this change for the new, dark framework where governments are trying to get more privacy and less depending on these companies. But in some extent, this is totally failing, to the point that the UK recently, in the most recent strategic report, they considered in the category of weapons of mass destruction some of the AI technologies at the same level as nuclear warheads and things like this, to the point to show you how they are concerned about the influence of these companies in today's world. So with this, I finalize, I think, my presentation.
All right.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Let's give a round of applause to Professor Renato. Yeah, there are so many things happening nowadays, and we are now experiencing not only geopolitical tension, but more than that. Yeah, multi-dimensional crisis. You mentioned many things like, I don't know, trade fragmentation, currency insecurities, supply chain disruption because of the pandemic, and many things. So I think this is not only a geopolitical issues, but rather business survival issues, right? Leadership issues. Since we are now in the part of the LEAP program, yeah, leadership and enhancement program from MBA program here, I only have one question actually. So what kind of leadership skill needed, yeah, to face this kind of uncertainties? Yeah, because as you can see here, we always teach the students about opportunity, but I think what we see now is actually permanent instability, right? Keep changing.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
what do you think?
I think that's a very important question, because leaders need to adjust, right, to what's going on these years. I think for many years after World War II, there was this idea that we could totally eliminate risk by creating this perfect world, right, with the perfect institutions and with the perfect, economic tools. We would reach a stage where conflict would be totally removed, and thus risk would disappear. As we know this, and as we have seen now, this didn't happen. So we need leaders that are capable of dealing with risk again and not seeking eliminate risk by influencing political decisions or by manipulating market conditions. We need leaders that are prepared to really understand that risk is the central element of capitalism, and the only way of developing a business is by understanding how to deal with risk.
Right.
So far, most leaders I have met try to eliminate risk by influencing every kind of decision and try to find, secure and stable rents for their revenues, and that's it. So we have to relaunch the entrepreneurial spirit of risk taking, right? Of understanding that out of maybe 10 strategies we launch, maybe one will work and the other 9 won't, and use it like in a portfolio approach and understand that this is just a trial error exercise all the time.
Right. Yeah, I'm agree with you because risk is actually something that we cannot avoid.
No.
But of course we can manage.
We can manage.
That's why we have risk management, right?
We
This
should.
is something that probably are needed. All right. Before I continue, maybe I will invite some question from the audience, from the floor. All right, somebody's raising hand. There's one, and then we have also young ladies there, also in the corner. Can we have somebody? Okay, from the middle. Yes, you, the one glasses. All right, maybe we can start with 3 questions first. Okay, you may start, Mas. Mention your name and also your class and batch.
All right. Good evening, Prof. Renato. And my name is Ahnaf. I am one of the students of Dr. Ranga in strategic management from SEMBA 50A. Yeah. Okay. First of all, I would like to say thank you for very insightful sharing sessions.
Thank you.
I would say it's very something that maybe we couldn't imagine what has been happened, right, during this period of time. I have 2 questions that I would like to get your explanation a bit. One is on all of the current challenges, right, on behind geopolitical issue. Sometimes most of us see this as a negative impact, right? But we also need to see this as something that may be as an opportunities. Like you mentioned, when the China not focusing on cheap products, but now Vietnam play the role, right? So what do you think or how we as employee or a company or countries find or catch these opportunities? I know Paranga also asked what kind of framework that we can use, right? So maybe you can also give us a good example of what kind of framework. For example, I think he mentioned about the FUCA, right? When we have all of this volatility, uncertainty, so is it still valid or you have something that may be more relevant? The second question is like, I think currently I feel we are in a very unfortunate situations with all of the digital advancements or sophisticated that we have, but we also behind on our basic needs, right? So we very proudly have AI and everything digital is massive, but actually AI sometimes replace jobs of many people, right? There are many unemployment rate, I believe is significantly increased. Not only in developed country, but maybe is even in underdeveloped country, but even in the developed countries. That's what I heard. So, from your opinion, right? How do you see this, and what should we do as employee, maybe here, to prevent this, continues and happen to us? So, I think that's my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So
Thank you.
You want to answer it or?
I think for the first question, I'm sure it's not a problem with the frameworks. It's a problem with the assumptions that we put in the frameworks.
Yeah.
So we have been creating a bias with the frameworks we use. But I think definitely, especially for small and medium companies, We need to use more of those, entrepreneurial-oriented tools like business model canvas, put people to discuss, right? And put people to visualize what they can bring together to make an effective business and make more people discussing. But the issue is not on the tools, in my perspective. The issue is definitely on the assumptions. Our assumptions are wrong. We always try to control risk, right? And say, no, this is a good course of action because I will avoid every possible risk. This is clearly not possible anymore, right? And to use a more risk-oriented strategy is definitely what new leaders have to take. So I can tell you one thing. This may seem a joke, but it's not. I've been advising business leaders in many places to take coaching because they cannot lead with this level of uncertainty. So they feel that they are not strong enough for that. I've been advising, take coaching. You need to trust yourself. You've been effective before, you can be effective now. Because there is no real, single tool that will give you the answers. It's your leadership that will make the difference, right? People matter. The models are just, analytical support, right? But people matter, and the business decisions come from people that are capable of leading the others behind, right? Even when things go wrong. So try to pretend that nothing is wrong, that everything is going well, and we are in control of it. It's the worst possible thing, right? So I think we need to develop more on the personal side, our leaders these days, give them the analytical tools, but also give them the empowerment, the personal empowerment, the kind of trust they need to have on themselves to really go through the process. That's why I think entrepreneurship, I have a bias because I'm from entrepreneurship area. So I have this bias. But those of you who have studied entrepreneurship knows that there is an effect called the valley of death, right? Which is a long period during which most entrepreneurial ventures disappear because they burn money faster than they get traction from market. We know that from the statistics, most companies won't survive. We need to understand this. This is the reality. That no matter what you do, the statistics are there. You won't change the statistics, right? So try to learn and try to improve, and then next time will be better. And this is the type of leadership that we need in those days, right? So get more connection with risk, more embrace risk, Instead of avoiding risk, embrace risk, learn from it. And then you'll be much better a leader in the future. So MBA gives you all the tools you need. And then you need to combine these tools with your personal mindset and outlook to create the leadership advantage. The other question related with how US is using the...
Also about AI, because you mentioned
AI, right?
About AI.
Yeah. So AI is considered these days to be the biggest competitive factor. So that's why China is investing so much and creating so much depth to improve on AI a lot more. So I think, and I can see it now, because on research we already see this happening, that without AI, it won't be possible to be competitive, right? Because AI extends our abilities, right? Speeds up the process. I can do something that would take me maybe a year. Now I can do it in 1 day using AI. I'm still doing it. But I can do it a lot faster by using AI. So this is the ultimate thing. But the good news is that AI is there, is access, not totally access free, but it's not inaccessible as other technologies have been in the 19th century, right, in the 20th century. More people have access to AI these days than anyone had in the past to other technologies. So you need to understand how relevant AI is, and we need to use it. So I have lots of students these days that use AI to make the assessments. So I give them an assessment that usually takes 3 hours, and 15 minutes later, they are delivering the assignment. And I say, oh, thank you, you are really good. Let me see the assignment. And I start discussing the assignment, and the student cannot say a word about the assignment. So this is the wrong way of using AI, that you put AI to replace you. You don't develop your abilities. AI is working alone. So that's the wrong way. But if you do it the right way, you can actually develop your abilities a lot more than you would. Because in 1 year, maybe you develop more abilities than you would in your entire career. So learn how to use AI, right? Don't be afraid of AI. Because either way, it is out there. So there is nothing you can do about it, you know? So use it and learn how to use it for your business. Learn how to be effective with AI, right? Learn how much AI could make a difference. Because definitely in the next few years at least, AI will be the ultimate differentiator for businesses. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Mas Afnas, I hope this answering your questions, yeah? And we have also a question from a lady somewhere there. Okay. Yeah, please mention your name and also your
Okay.
class.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity. Good evening, Professor and Paranga. My name is Nuranisa Azara, and I'm from Semba 50A. So, I would like to ask about the impact of the globalizations and supply chains diversification in Southeast Asia, as you mentioned in the beginning of your presentations, when China tried to reduce exports and many global companies try to diversify their supply chains. You said that countries such as Vietnam and Thailand were able to attract significant manufacturing benefits and investment to their country. But in contrast, in Indonesia, we didn't benefit to the same extent. And despite having a larger populations, in your opinion, and maybe from your perspective from outside, what kind of factors may explain this gap, and what should Indonesia prioritize in order to become more competitive in this field? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Obrigada.
Very good
Thank you very
question,
much
Prof.
for your question.
Mhm.
I think, the most amazing example of a country upgrading, a country that was not developed and suddenly become one of the top countries in the world, is Japan, right? Japan. Between 1945 and 1979, Japan moved from never produced a car before to be leader in the US, which was the leader. 34 years took Japan. I always use this example. What was behind this success, this amazing, unique success? One thing: ambition. The only thing that Japan had was ambition. So Japan set an agenda to become the world leader in the car industry. Had zero technology, zero knowledge, zero experience in distribution channels, and plus had the natural resistance of the American consumers because of the Pearl Harbor event. And in 34 years, Japan was leader in the US. So anything you want to do, first you need the ambition, then you need a strategy. And of course, you have to be prepared to do lots of mistakes and learn with the process. Japan is by far the best possible example you can find, and still is the third economy in the world, right? After so many setbacks after that, still is a landmark for so many things. And it began with zero. The only thing Japan had in 1945 was military equipment, right? So if I was a business leader in Indonesia, looking at the current geopolitical situation, I would try to replace for sure, and I would try to look for the demand of European countries that are eager to replace their dependency on China. So this is easier said than done, for sure. But you need to approach, because you know there is that demand, you have to go to some countries and start engaging some discussions and see how much people are willing to do that change. And I also understand how much people trust Indonesia as a business setting, right? As a political setting, as a cultural setting, and then see who are the right targets for this, right? Japan is a great example, but there's another very interesting example that happened with another African country, which is Rwanda. Rwanda was the best. Rwanda doesn't have oil, and the other traditional commodities that some African countries have as a leverage. So Rwanda had coffee beans. So decided to create a strategy, an upgrading strategy, based on coffee beans. So the president of Rwanda personally passed an agreement with Starbucks, which is the largest network for coffee in the US. And Starbucks replaced the coffee beans they use from Colombia, which is neighbor, right, to Rwanda coffee beans. So there was the ambition and there was the strategy, right? And there was the action. The country was so small that the president took that initiative on his own. Maybe Indonesia is too big to put the president doing this for one company or for one business sector. But I am sure that with the right strategy, Indonesia could get lots of contracts in Europe. You have no idea how many companies are really eager to abandon the dependency on China, right? Of course, on the flip side, you need to have the skills, right? You need to be capable of delivering. Of course, that is the pre-assessment you have to do, right? But again, geopolitical changes these days is nobody wants to rely everything on the same place. And Southeast Asia is considered to be in Europe a region where people are reliable, hardworking, right? And it is possible to do business with good results. So that's why Vietnam is taking advantage of that. Thailand is taking advantage of that. Cambodia, in some extent, is also taking advantage of that. So I see no reason why Indonesia is not taking advantage of that. Indonesia is even bigger, right? So could have a better, scale effect performance. And I think there is a lot to be done in Indonesia from my perspective, in terms of going outside and creating business alliances, right? I think there is a lot to be done. Okay, but you need to have the ambition first. Without ambition, there is no way. Japan would never be what it is without that kind of ambition. We could call it in some extent, there is arrogance behind, right? But it's okay. It's a positive arrogance, right? It's a kind of arrogance that makes you move forward, okay? But definitely, you need ambition and you need a strategy. You cannot wait and see what's happening. You cannot wait people to come and knock at your door. This is not happening anymore, okay? This isn't happening anymore. So you see that Europe has passed an agreement with India recently, the biggest agreement ever with India. But when you talk with business leaders in Europe, there is not much trust on India because there is a track record of failures, and things that did not happen as. But still, they passed the agreement because they are eager to diversify. They need to diversify. So it's a question of is there an ambition in Indonesia? Yes or no? Is there a strategy to develop, and to contribute to those supply chains? If not, who can lead this process? Business associations, government, universities, a national partnership. There are lots of things. But I think, you should move and should move fast, in my view.
Yeah, because I have also a follow-up question. I mean, when you visit Indonesia a lot, and the sad thing about your slides, actually, we cannot see Indonesia there. Indonesia is never become a central player in global economy, although you mentioned so many opportunities that we can do. So what is missing here? What's wrong in Indonesia, according to your point of view as an expert, as an outsider?
Ambition and strategy, right? I think maybe Indonesia did not yet develop that ambition.
Not enough ambition, you mean?
Not enough ambition.
Oh.
So you need to want to upgrade, you know. I think every single country that is successful today, it all started with the ambition to be successful. Many out of arrogance, you know, because they felt that they were already superior. Japan is a little bit like that. Germany was a lot like that, right? UK was a lot like that. France. But Switzerland, no. Switzerland was a very small country, you know, surrounded by mountains, no good natural conditions, stuck in the middle of Europe, surrounded by enemies. And now is one of the top nations, right, from industrialization perspective. What did they develop? Ambition. And then a strategy to be successful. So maybe you need to create like a forum, a national forum to discuss the basis for a new strategy, bringing together business leaders, academic leaders, political leaders, and create this agenda for, you know, for the future. What is Indonesia willing to do with so many resources, right? So many natural resources. Just take the water, the economic, the exclusive economic zone of Indonesia in terms of water, the fishery, all the marine resources, right? So there's so much that could be done, in my view, so much.
Yeah, we discussed a lot about the importance of mission in our class, right? And finding a mission is like finding a purpose, like finding a reason for existence, finding your why. Yeah, because if you cannot find your why, then probably you will lose your way. Then probably will get lost in this middle of this uncertainty. Okay.
You have to do that.
Yes, we have also somebody raising hand here from the middle, with glasses. Thank you. And next will be continued with, yeah, the nice young man there. All right. Please mention your name and also your class and batch.
Hello, good evening, Pak Rangga, and hi Renato. My name is Ratna. I'm from class of 51B. So a bit of background, Renato, I'm also working in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So I have been advising businesses in early stage, and also I'm doing impact investing. So I'm very excited to be in your lecture today. Yay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I have two questions. The first one is related to the sector. In this VUCA world, as mentioned before, which sector do you think will be a winning sector, and which ones will be the losing sector? And then the second one, I have been working with a lot of social enterprise, or we call it impact-driven business or impactful business, or whatever it's called, social enterprise, I call it. Do you think this kind of business will thrive in the middle of this kind of situation? Because this kind of business are usually having a thinner profit margin, and they also most of the time have a higher cost. So what would you advise for this kind of business?
Can you repeat the sector? I didn't get the.
What will be the winning sector and the losing sector?
But you said if this sector that has a tiny margin, which sector were you referring?
Oh, sorry. The question number two.
Yes, the number two.
Yeah, it's related to the social business.
Social business.
Yeah.
Social entrepreneurship.
Social
Yes,
enterprise.
I wanted to be sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Can we also continue to the next questions because we have limited time? So
Sure, of
we
course,
can
of
only
course.
accommodate one more questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Pak. Good evening, Professor Renato Pereira. Is
Good evening.
good lecturer also. So I am Krishna from IMBA 20. So actually, I have two questions regarding the deglobalization. I think it's good topic for me also because I'm working at multinational company. What do you see in the future regarding deglobalization? Is that will be increase more and reduce the globalization or not? Because I think AI also will not just supporting but fueling the deglobalization, because with the AI, a lot of the local company can compete with the multinational company that never happened before. So
Exactly.
I don't know what do you think in the future that this situation happen? It will be difficult for multinational company to compete, and we will see the rising of the deglobalization for the local company, or in the future maybe it will not compete because the multinational already there been long time ago. And the second question is regarding this one also. So if we are in the local company right now, what do you think that we need to prepare, the strength that we need to prepare if we want to compete to the broader, to the foreign, to spread our wing maybe to the Southeast Asia first, or we can go directly to the UK or Europe, something like that.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. I'm sorry we don't have time because we have like already 2 questions from
Yes.
Ratna and Krishna, if you don't mind, yeah? Yeah.
Sure.
The first question is related with the winning sector and also about social entrepreneurship, social
Entrepreneurship,
business. And then from Krishna asking about the effect of deglobalization, yeah, for the multinational companies, yeah? And also for the local companies, of course. Yeah.
So for the first 2 questions, I think there is no winning or losing sectors. There will be winning and losing, for example, professions, right? So many things that are done today by people will probably be replaced by AI, but the total set of economic needs will remain more or less the same. So I think for a national strategy, for example, is a lot more about diversification, because, for example, with the climate change, there is an increase in food insecurity, and countries that gave up producing food, for example, because they would import from another place, are now rebuilding their supply chains for local production. So this also connects with the social entrepreneurship or social. We definitely, in a country like Indonesia, you have to, there should be a significant investment in community building. So that you do with the social entrepreneurship, right? You need to create more resilience, and the social entrepreneurship area is definitely a critical area for this kind of endeavor. So the thing is how to fund this, right? How do you get funding? Who is supporting these activities? But the importance of those activities are actually more and more relevant these days, right? If people are not supported, they normally take desperate measures. They join, this kind of radical groups, right? And they start disconnecting from the local needs. So what the community loses from having this kind of process is so much that actually I cannot conceive living today without social entrepreneurship. So the problem is how to fund social entrepreneurship, right? Who is supporting it and how it could be done. But there is one of the critical things for the future is definitely community building and social entrepreneurship. So I have no doubt about this. We can discuss later if there is a funding issue or not, but I think that definitely this is one of the key activities, okay, for the future. For the other problem, the globalization. So in my view, you will see less global companies in the future. You know, companies like Coca-Cola that you find in every country in the world, right? Because everybody drinks Coca-Cola. I think there will be less of that in the future. There will be more domestic and regional companies that are successful in local strategies, but I see lots of barriers for the future development of multinational business in the years to come. There is a natural reaction against this type of strategy. And the fact that globalization created these so many issues, it's a good opportunity for local businesses actually to develop. So not every global company will suffer from the same issues, but definitely the economy will more based on the proximity, right? Resource proximity and partnership proximity, right? And branding development locally. Then, like we saw in the years after the World War II. So why so many multinational companies developed? Because there was a huge gap between the US and the rest of the world economy. Today is not the same anymore, right? Today is not the same. And AI will even decrease more this kind of gap, right? That's why you can be more, I think, more focused. You could be more secure that focusing on a local strategy using these technologies that are spread across the world will be probably more efficient than going to going global.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just checking the clock now. We still have maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Busari, can we accommodate one more question or? Okay, sure. Okay. One question more because I saw somebody raising hand back there. Anybody? Yes. Okay, please, Mas. Please make it quick, ya. Ya, silakan, Mas. Oh, udah keluar. Okay, he left already.
He left. The last question is left.
So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, let's give an applause again to Professor Renato Pereira. And yes, unfortunately, we are approaching at the end of our session. And thank you for your enlightenment.
My pleasure. Thank you for
this
having me
evening,
tonight.
yeah. And of course, something that we can learn from our talk today is actually we can agree that future is actually not belong to those who can only manage company, but somebody who can also manage uncertainty.
Of
right?
course.
Because so many things happening. And
Definitely, that is the key lesson.
right. And I'm also agree with you. Yeah, it's important to build like rich management capabilities, right? Also strengthen with mission and visions, right? Because we discuss about VUCA, and of course VUCA stands from volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And we always discuss about another VUCA, yeah, to solve this VUCA issue,
Yes.
which is the first V is actually vision, yeah. So we try to confront volatility with vision, like what you mentioned before. And then uncertainty with understanding, yeah. We need to better understand the situation, yeah. And then we have also handled complexity with clarity of missions that you
Yes.
mentioned before, right?
Of course.
And then the last, we have also what is called as ambiguity. We need some dose of agility, all right? Ability to adapt, yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. So with that, thank you very much again for attending this executive series. And I hope you enjoyed this evening and see you in the next MBA executive series.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Recording stopped.
Thank you, Pak Rangga. Thank you, Prof. Renato. Please once again to big applause for Prof. Renato dan Pak Rangga. Okay, thank you so much for your attending this event, students. We would like to apologize for any shortcoming through the event. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.